What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now, my name is Gabe Ortega. We're in the garage today again, but we're not going to be working on my DSMs. I'm actually going to be sharing a story with you guys that hopefully you might find interesting. Now, I posted a video a while back on what I do for a living, and surprisingly, I got tons and tons of comments about you guys asking how I bought my first property. So today, I'm going to be showing you guys how I bought my first property and the steps I took to get there. Now, real fast, I'm a regular automotive mechanic, literally nothing special. I work a regular day job from 9 to 5, and over the last 4 years, I've been buying rental real estate. As of right now, I own about 8 units of rental property. At the end of this month, I'm going to own 16 units, which comes out to a total of $1.1 million. Now, it's crazy to think that that can actually happen, but you know, if it wasn't for the videos that I watched and the forums that I read and everything else and everybody showing me what to do and what not to do, I would never be where I am today. So I am so humble and thankful and grateful that I actually get a chance to make this video. And I think it's only right and only fair if I do the exact same thing, because if it wasn't for those people, I would never be where I'm at today. So before I start talking about how I bought my first property, I really want to go over the steps I took before I bought my property, because getting yourself prepared to buy your first property, that's the number one important thing before you even buy. First off, it all started when I got out of high school. Now, I got my first job at 18 years old as an automotive mechanic. And to this day, I still never left. I still work at that day job. And I love what I do, but I knew there was always something more out there. When I was 21 years old, I was still being an automotive mechanic. One of my best friends came up to me and he said, "Gabe, I got something for you. You need to check this out." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "Gabe, read this book. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad." And if you guys haven't read this book that teaches you about assets and liabilities and passive income, assets puts money into your pocket, liabilities takes money from your pocket. The more liabilities you have, more than likely the more poorer you'll be, versus the more assets you have, the more wealthier you'll be. So with all this knowledge that I had, I should have went out and bought some type of asset or did something, but instead I sat around for 2 years and I did absolutely nothing. I wasted 2 years. I did nothing. It was dumb. I shouldn't have done that. When I hit 23 years old, my girlfriend and she inherited a trailer, and we had the bright idea that, well, hey, you know, let's make some passive income and some assets. So we ended up deciding to rehab this single wide trailer, and we made it look super, super nice, and we were going to rent it out or live in it. We ended up not doing either of those things. We actually rented out to family. And family and friends you should never do business with, just because of the fact that you don't want to hurt feelings, you don't want to step on each other's toes. That's completely normal. We actually started looking at housing to buy. Now, we were still living with my mom at the time, which I'm so thankful for her, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be able to save up and actually buy my first house. Here's the problem. When I was 23 years old, believe it or not, I was $22,000 in debt. Take a guess why. I had credit cards, personal debt, personal loans. I had medical bills that was crazy. I didn't want to have a mortgage on top of all of this. So in order for us to buy our first house, we actually paid off all my debt using what's called a debt snowball. And at the time, I had no idea what this was. I just did it. Paying off debt is such a mind game. How the debt snowball works is you line up all of your debts, smallest to largest, and you're going to be making minimum payments on all of your debts. Doesn't matter what the interest is. And with your smallest debt is you're going to throw as much money as you can at it to pay it off. And eventually you're going to pay off your first smallest debt. Now you're going to take all that money and throw it at your second smallest debt while still maintaining minimum payments on the rest of your balances. Every time you pay off a debt, it's going to give you a sense of accomplishment where it's going to continue this process, and then eventually you're going to be debt free. Because one of the biggest challenges is when you're working at paying off your debt, all of a sudden you get the urge to swipe your credit card and then you're back at day one. This is how I paid off $22,000 of debt, and it works. And within a year's time, I was able to pay off $22,000 in debt. I was making about $40,000 to $45,000 a year. Over the next couple months, I was doing a bunch of side jobs and working as much hours as I can, really killing myself. I was able to save up another $9,000, and we found a house in 2016, and it was a 4-bedroom, 2-bath It was actually listed on Facebook is where I found it, on the Facebook marketplace, and they were asking $168,000. And well, me, of course, I tried to knock him down to $155,000. When I offered him, he accepted. Come to find out, I was actually one of the first people to come looking at this listing. He posted it within about 6 hours, so obviously early bird gets the worm. Now, in order to buy this house, which is actually the house that we're in right now, I actually had to come up with 3.5%, which I used an FHA loan to buy my first property. We're gonna fast forward just a little bit. If it wasn't for this property, I would have never bought my Ford unit using a HELOC, but we'll get to that way later. So we had the money, but at the time I had no idea how to buy a property. Because we weren't using agents, because it was a for sale by owner, because we really had no idea what we were doing, I found a mortgage lender, and my mortgage lender, he went step by step on everything that I had to do and what I had to come up with to actually buy my property. You know, I needed that 3.5%, 2 years of a tax income, you know, your W-2s, 2 months of bank statements, proof of income, like your job. At the end of the 2 months, I was able to sign a big stack of papers about this big. I finally owned my first property. I know it doesn't seem crazy or sophisticated, or, you know, a matter of fact, it sounds kind of boring. This is my first property that I bought, and this is my personal residence that I live in. And if I never bought this house, I would never have gotten to expand off my equity that I have on here and purchase property from somewhere else. But this is where things got a little bit different. Now, obviously, I was tired of trading my time for dollars. You know, I was there for 8 hours and I could only get paid for 8 hours at my job. And, you know, I wanted to make more money, obviously. So what I ended up doing, as a mechanic, you become flat rate. And flat rate is you get paid off commissions. So let's just say, for an example, in an 8-hour period, I could do about 15 to 20 hours of work and get paid for those 20 hours. Now, obviously, to do this, it's very scary, because at the same time, if you only make, you know, 3 hours that day for 8 hours, well, guess what? You only get paid for 3 hours, which that's the risky part. But going flat rate was probably one of the best things I've ever done, because after about a year living here, I read the book again, Rich Dad Poor Dad, when I was 24 years old. And immediately I went on Facebook, because obviously that's where I found my first house. Hopefully I can find my second house on Facebook. And sure enough, just posted, I found a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and they were asking $68,000 for it. Now, at the time, I was like, how am I gonna do this? I don't have the 25% that you're supposed to put down for an investment property. So what I ended up doing was called house hack. And house hack is when you buy a property for really low down and you live in it for the intended year, and you move out and you rent it. Now, this is by far one of the easiest and best strategies to get into real estate. I could have turned my first house I bought into a rental property, but instead I used it as a second home. Again, I was the first person to look at it. I went down there immediately. He was asking $68,000, and I offered him at $55,000. Of course, he was in a hurry to sell, and he accepted my offer. Now, I didn't have financing lined up. I didn't have anything lined up. I didn't have insurance, nothing. I saw a property, I went down there, I took action, and I made an offer instantly. And I didn't think twice about it. So I went back to my same mortgage lender, and he told me that if I wanted to move into this house, I would have to use a conventional 5% loan. So I would have to pay about 5% plus closing costs, which the total came out to about $5,200 to $5,500. So eventually we closed on my second property, and on that house, we did live in that property, and we used my first property as a second home. Now, before doing this, you have to be very, very clear with your lender what you're doing, because if you don't live there for the first year, it's actually illegal and you can get into really big trouble. So you do have to have full intention of living there. The main reason why we bought it so cheap was because it needed tons of work. It actually didn't have a kitchen, it didn't have flooring, it didn't have paint, It didn't have a bathroom. It was in really rough shape. So we bought a really big fixer-upper. We bought it with a conventional loan for 5%. We moved in. We lived in it for a year. Now, during that whole entire year, we obviously lived there and fixed up this property while keeping our second house as a second home. We would kind of go back and forth, but spending about 70% of our time in this house, obviously one, because we were working on it so much. And during this whole process, I was always honest and always very open on what we were doing with my lenders, because at no time and point did I ever want something bad to happen, nor do I ever suggest lying about any of that, because like I said, you can get into really big trouble if you do. And eventually, after that year was finally over, the rehab was done, the house was beautiful, and we really put our blood, sweat, and tears into this property, and it was beautiful, where we actually rented it out after our year. And how we did that is we actually made a listing and posted on the Facebook marketplace, again, for rent. And I actually had 30 applications that day, and it blew my mind. Now, those two properties that I bought were all owner-occupied loans. The most exciting property that I bought, I actually was scrolling through Facebook again, and I came across this post for $100,000. It was a seller finance deal for 3 single-family homes. This is by far my best property that I ever did, because this property made over $250,000, and it took me actually 3 years of rehabbing it. Now, this property, when it came up for sale, what I negotiated with the seller is that I would put $5,000 down. He would carry the loan for 3 years on a balloon note for 30 years amortized. Now, if you don't know what that means, that just means that I got a killer deal. Oh wait, I forgot to say, interest-only payments. Now, that property all by itself in its own is its own video. It goes everything from total rehabs to total guts. I mean, I'm taking off the floors. I'm losing $7,000 from a contractor with one leg that he moved out to Oklahoma in the middle of the night. He stole from me. It's insane. And right before these properties were finished, I was still rehabbing them. And that's when I saw a 4-unit for sale on Facebook as well. And when I offered the seller, I actually bought that property using a HELOC from the first house that I bought, which is kind of like a credit card that you get on your home. I hope you guys learned something today, because if I can do this, anybody can. I'm a regular automotive mechanic. I'm nobody special. I know this video wasn't the best, and I'm hoping to get better at them and explain to you guys more on how I bought my properties. This is a real video, and you know, I tried to script it, but it just doesn't work. I just have to go with the flow and just, you know, say it how it comes. I'm used to filming cars. This is what I feel comfortable doing, and I want to get more comfortable, you know, talking to you guys about my real estate and how I went from 0 to 16 units. And we still have to talk about the 3 single-family houses with $5,000 down that made me over $250,000. And we also have to talk about how I took out a HELOC on my personal house to purchase a 4-unit. And we also have to talk about how I'm purchasing this 8-unit apartment building, which I'm gonna have to put $75,000 down. But that money didn't come from my pocket. So I hope you guys subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and let me know on more stuff that I can do. I do plan on doing tons more videos on my properties. Hopefully you guys will enjoy them. So just like that, I'll see you guys later. Bye.